Dust billowed around my beat-up truck as I pulled up to the old dirt driveway. The farm stretched out before me, a patchwork of tilled earth and overgrown fields. The farmhouse in the distance was a study in decay, paint peeling and porch sagging. I stepped out of the truck, my boots kicking up dust devils in the afternoon sun. The silence was unnerving, broken only by the distant caw of a crow. My name is Jack. 2 weeks ago I was a city dweller stuck in a dead-end job. Then I saw the ad, farmhand wanted. Room and board provided. It seemed like the perfect escape. Now, standing here with the sun beating down on me, I wasn't so sure. I grabbed my duffel bag from the truck bed. The farmhouse loomed closer as I walked up the dirt driveway. The windows were dark, like empty eyes watching me. The silence continued to press in, broken only by the crunching of my boots on the dry earth. A shiver ran down my spine, a sudden chill that had nothing to do with the heat. I told myself it was just nerves, the uneasiness of being in a new place. As I reached the porch steps, I noticed something hanging from the porch swing. It swayed slightly in the breeze, a limp, grotesque figure. I cautiously approached the porch, my boots echoing on the wooden planks. The Scarecrow swung gently, its head lolling at an unnatural angle. It was dressed in ragged overalls stuffed with straw, but the hands were different. They weren't made of straw or cloth. They were real, human hands. They were withered and pale, the skin stretched taut over bones, the fingers were long and bony, curled into a permanent grasp. The nails were thick and yellowed like the claws of some grotesque bird. I stared at those hands, my stomach churning. This wasn't a prank. This was something far more sinister. I forced myself to look away from the hands and up at the Scarecrow's face. It was a mask of stitched-together flesh. The skin was stretched tight over the skull, the eyes empty sockets staring out into nothingness. A ragged gash ran from its forehead to its chin, revealing rows of yellowed teeth. My blood ran cold. I whirled around, my heart pounding in my chest. A figure stood in the doorway of the farmhouse. He was tall and gaunt, his face hidden in the shadows of a wide-brimmed hat. He leaned against the doorframe, his arms crossed over his chest. He was watching me with an unsettling intensity. "You must be Jack," the figure said, his voice raspy as if he hadn't spoken in days. "I've been expecting you." I stared at him, my mind racing. Who was this man, and what did he want? "Don't be alarmed," the figure said, a hint of a smile playing on his lips. "That's just old Joe. He's harmless, mostly." He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound that sent shivers down my spine. His words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken threat. I felt a chill run down my spine despite the sweltering heat. This was no ordinary farm. This man with his unsettling grin and eyes that glinted like shards of obsidian was no ordinary farmer. My gut screamed at me to run, to put as much distance as possible between myself and this place. I turned, my blood turning to ice as I saw the figure step out of the farmhouse's shadow. He moved with a surprising speed, his long limbs carrying him across the porch with an almost predatory grace. The tire iron felt cold and slick in my sweaty grip, offering little comfort. Terror lent speed to my limbs. I spun on my heels, scrambling back towards my truck. The engine roared to life, a welcome sound of potential escape in this nightmare. But as I slammed the truck into gear, I saw him, the farmer, standing in the middle of the dirt driveway, blocking my escape. He was no longer smiling. His face was a mask of cold fury, his eyes burning with a malevolent light. He raised a hand, and in his grip I saw a rusty sickle glint in the fading sunlight. I slammed my foot on the gas pedal, the truck lurching forward. The farmer didn't flinch. I stumbled through the fields, my lungs burning, my legs screaming for rest. But I didn't dare stop. Not while he was still out there. The farmhouse loomed in the distance, a dark silhouette against the dying light. I had to get as far away from it as possible. I veered away from the farmhouse towards a cluster of outbuildings that huddled together like frightened animals. Maybe I could find a phone, a weapon, anything to help me escape this nightmare. It wasn't a table for dining. This table was scarred, stained a dark, almost black crimson. Tools, if you could call them that, lay scattered across its surface. Rusty hooks, wickedly sharp blades that glinted under the dim light bulb. And a bone saw, its teeth dulled from use but no less terrifying. The air hung thick and heavy, the metallic reek of blood almost suffocating. But the true horror, the sight that pried a scream from my throat, was what lay upon that table. Bodies. Mutilated, dismembered bodies piled haphazardly like discarded meat. I forced myself to look closer, to really see the victims. Their faces, contorted in their final moments of agony, were etched with terror, their eyes wide with the understanding that they were about to meet a gruesome end. Some were young, barely old enough to shave, their eyes still holding a spark of youthful optimism, now extinguished. Others were older, their faces etched with the lines of hard living, their eyes holding the weary acceptance of a life that had already seen its share of hardship. But they all shared one thing in common. They had come to this farm seeking something, a fresh start, a new beginning, and they had found only death. I could almost hear their silent screams echoing in the darkness, their pleas for mercy drowned out by the farmers' laughter. These weren't just bodies. Pushing myself to my feet, I stumbled back from the gruesome tableau. Each ragged breath I drew felt like shards of glass in my lungs, the coppery tang of blood, a constant reminder of the horror I'd just witnessed. I had to get out, had to find a way to escape this butcher's playground. The barn door, the only visible exit, was no longer an option. He could be out there waiting, sickle in hand, ready to claim his next victim. Panic threatened to overwhelm me, but a flicker of hope ignited within the icy grip of fear. There had to be another way out. A hidden passage, a forgotten window. Anything. As my eyes adjusted to the gloom, I noticed a faint glow emanating from the far end of the barn. Ignoring the whispers that seemed to claw at my sanity, I reached the door. It was old, the wood warped and cracked with age. A rusty padlock, its metal eaten away by time and neglect, held it shut. I glanced around, my heart sinking. There had to be a key, something to break this last shackle. My gaze fell upon the tools scattered across the butcher's table. A wave of nausea washed over me, but desperation outweighed my revulsion. I had to try. Hurrying back to the table, I averted my eyes from the carnage, focusing solely on the tools of death. I needed something heavy, something that could shatter the rusted lock. The darkness beyond the door was absolute, the sliver of moonlight swallowed by a void that seemed to pulse with a life of its own. The whispers, louder now, seemed to emanate from the darkness, beckoning me forward with promises of escape and threats of unimaginable horrors. I hesitated, my hand trembling on the door handle, the weight of the unknown pressing down on me. But the stench of death, clinging to the air, the memory of the butchered souls inside the barn, spurred me forward. Taking a deep breath, I stepped into the void, the door creaking shut behind me with the finality of a coffin lid slamming closed. The darkness enveloped me, thick and heavy, a living presence that seemed to coil around me, squeezing the air from my lungs. I fumbled blindly, my outstretched hands encountering rough-hewn earth and the damp chill of stone. My foot snagged on something, sending me sprawling into the darkness. The ladder seemed to stretch on forever, descending into the bowels of the earth. The air grew colder, heavier, as if the weight of the world pressed down on me. The darkness was absolute, broken only by the occasional phosphorescent glimmer emanating from some unseen fungus clinging to the tunnel walls. The whispers followed me down, their mournful tones echoing in the confined space, seeming to amplify the terror that clawed at my sanity. They were closer now, clearer, and I swore I could feel their icy breath on the back of my neck, their skeletal fingers brushing against my skin. I tried to block them out, tried to focus on putting one hand over the other, on the simple act of climbing down into the unknown, but the whispers burrowed into my mind, their mournful chorus a constant reminder of the fate that awaited me above. The images I had tried so desperately to suppress, the butchered bodies, the vacant eyes staring into eternity, the pulsating heart flashed before my eyes, fueled by the whispers that seemed to weave themselves into the very fabric of my being. Hope, once a flickering candle in the darkness, sputtered and died, leaving me adrift in a sea of despair. Just when the darkness threatened to consume me, to drag me down into its depths, the ladder ended. My foot touched solid ground, the earth cold and damp beneath my boots. I fumbled for a handhold, my fingers finding a rough-hewn passage that led away from the ladder. The whispers, though still present, seemed to fade slightly, their mournful chorus replaced by a low, guttural murmuring that echoed through the tunnels. It was a sound that spoke of something ancient, something evil, lurking in the darkness. I stumbled forward, my hand trailing along the tunnel wall, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. The air grew slightly warmer, the stench of decay replaced by the earthy aroma of damp soil and something else. Something faintly sweet like honeysuckle. And then I saw it. A faint light like the first glimmer of dawn beckoning me forward. Hope, fragile but tenacious, flickered back to life within me. I stumbled towards the light, my pace quickening, my lungs burning with the need for fresh air, for escape, for a chance to outrun the nightmare that clung to me like a shroud. The light grew stronger as I pressed onward, the tunnel opening into a larger cavern. The air, though still stale and heavy, was noticeably fresher, carrying with it the scent of pine needles and damp earth. The whispers, though still audible, were fainter now, like the dying embers of a nightmare. Hope surged through me, a lifeline in the suffocating darkness. Could this be it? Could I truly be escaping this hell on earth? The cavern walls were damp and slick, the air thick with the smell of moss and something else, something metallic, something that made my stomach churn. I pushed the thought away, focusing on the light that now illuminated the entire cavern. It emanated from a single opening in the far wall, a jagged tear in the earth that promised escape. I stumbled towards it, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. As I drew closer, the light revealed the source of the metallic scent. Blood. It coated the cavern floor, pooling in viscous puddles that reflected the eerie light like pools of liquid obsidian. My stomach lurched, bile rising in my throat. This wasn't an escape route, it was a trap. The whispers, fainter just moments ago, returned with a vengeance, swirling around me, mocking my hope, my desperation. They were no longer mournful. They were filled with a gleeful malice, a triumphant revelry that sent chills crawling down my spine. I had walked right into the monster's lair. The light grew stronger as I pressed onward, the tunnel opening into a larger cavern. The air, though still stale and heavy, was noticeably fresher, carrying with it the scent of pine needles and damp earth. The whispers, though still audible, were fainter now, like the dying embers of a nightmare. Hope surged through me, a lifeline in the suffocating darkness. Could this be it? Could I truly be escaping this hell on earth? The cavern walls were damp and slick, the air thick with the smell of moss and something else, something metallic, something that made my stomach churn. I pushed the thought away, focusing on the light that now illuminated the entire cavern. It emanated from a single opening in the far wall, a jagged tear in the earth that promised escape. I stumbled towards it, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. As I drew closer, the light revealed the source of the metallic scent. Blood. It coated the cavern floor, pooling in viscous puddles that reflected the eerie light like pools of liquid obsidian. My stomach lurched, bile rising in my throat. This wasn't an escape route, it was a trap. The whispers, fainter just moments ago, returned with a vengeance, swirling around me, mocking my hope, my desperation. They were no longer mournful. They were filled with a gleeful malice, a triumphant revelry that sent chills crawling down my spine. I had walked right into the monster's lair. I stumbled back from the bloody opening, my eyes frantically searching for another way out. But the cavern offered no escape, only the jagged tear leading back to the surface. And him. He was out there, I knew it, waiting for me, his grotesque grin illuminated by the moonlight, his sickle glinting in the darkness. Driven by a primal need to survive, I scrambled through the opening, the whispers nipping at my heels like rabid dogs. The night air hit me like a physical blow, cold and damp, heavy with the scent of pine and damp earth. The forest loomed around me, a dark and menacing presence under the pale glow of the moon. I didn't know where I was going, only that I had to put as much distance as possible between myself and that cursed farm. The whispers followed, their mournful chorus replaced by a cacophony of rustling leaves and snapping twigs, each sound a phantom footstep, each shadow a lurking nightmare. The forest seemed to close in on me, the trees twisting and contorting into grotesque shapes that mocked my terror. The air grew thick with the smell of decay, the ground soft and yielding beneath my feet. I could feel it now, the darkness closing in, the whispers tightening their grip on my sanity. I ran until my lungs burned and my legs screamed for mercy, until the trees blurred into a dizzying kaleidoscope of shadows and moonlight. But the whispers followed, relentless, their icy fingers trailing across my skin, their laughter echoing in my ears. I was trapped in a nightmare, a waking hell where every step led me deeper into despair. Tripping over a gnarled root, I crashed to the forest floor, the breath knocked out of me. As I lay there, my chest heaving, I realized the truth. I wasn't going to outrun this. There was no escape from this nightmare. The whispers were right. I was theirs. A low chuckle, close now, sent a shiver of primal fear down my spine. I looked up, my blood turning to ice. He stood there, silhouetted against the moonlit sky, his eyes burning with a cold, malevolent light. The sickle in his hand glinted like a beacon of death. "Welcome home, Jack," he said,
Check.
his voice
Check
a raspy
one, check
whisper
two.
that seemed to slither through the trees. Old Joe's been waiting. As the darkness closed in, I saw the truth reflected in his eyes. This wasn't the end, it was only the beginning. The world dissolved into a dizzying blur of pain and terror. The farmer's laughter echoed through the forest as darkness swallowed me whole. My struggles were met with a practiced ease. I was dragged back through the forest, whispers swirling around me like a chorus of the damned. The faint glow of the moon illuminated the clearing ahead, and then I saw him, Old Joe, the Scarecrow, his grotesque visage, a macabre beacon in the heart of darkness. A single tear traced down Old Joe's cheek. I understood. I was the replacement. The harvest moon had risen, and I was the sacrifice.